This is the Puck Junk Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Puck Junk Hockey Podcast. I'm Sal Barry, and with me today is Tim Parish, and we are going to talk about the All-Star Weekend that just took place recently. We're also going to talk about the NHL announcing that it will participate in the next two Winter Olympics, and we will talk about what the NHL is planning in lieu of next year's All-Star Game. They got something different planned. We'll talk about that. We'll also do another Setrospective from the 93-94 season. As you know, it is the 30th anniversary of the 1993-94 season, the year that the New York Rangers won the Stanley Cup. Of course, Clemente's not here today. He's at a Rangers game, and we'll talk about Rangers stuff closer to the 30th anniversary of that. But also, we had a bunch of cool, different, unique hockey card sets come out that year. This episode, we're going to talk about the 1993-94 Fleer Ultra set. So, Tim, how are you doing? Have you fully recovered from the All-Star Weekend?
Oh, yeah, just total all-star hangover going on. I don't know. I don't know that I'll ever recover, actually.
3 days of just all-starring it up, huh?
3 days of something. That's for sure. It was like a tale of multiple things, the coverage of all of that. So I think we should dive into that here.
Like instead of a tale of two cities, it was a tale of three networks, all owned by Disney, but still like three different networks. You had ESPN2, you had ESPN, and then you had ABC.
Yes. Not to mention Plus thrown in for good measure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I had to actually rely on Plus a little bit because I actually recorded the All-Star game on Saturday because I had plans. So I only watched the first game, and then I recorded it. And then when I went to rewatch it, of course, the last 10 minutes, I think the last half of the final game got lopped off because it exceeded its time slot. So, of course, my recorded ended sharp after 3 hours, and I had to, go to ESPN Plus, and then I had to, watch that game, and then I had to, queue it up to that spot. But fortunately, I think the games were, separated, so I was able to just pull that one game, if I remember correctly. But, yeah, why don't we start with the fantasy draft, which was a fun idea that they did, a decade ago. They did it for a couple of years, and then they stopped doing it, when they switched to the 3-on-3 format. So this is the first time that they've done a fantasy draft with the 3-on-3 format of the All-Star game. So I know you were very upset about how that all went down. So why don't you explain to the listeners why you were triggered by this fantasy draft?
That's a pretty powerful word right there. Shouldn't throw that around lightly. I wouldn't call it triggered. I would just simply say that a great idea, a great concept, going back to the fantasy, have the captains pick their teams from the pool of players that were available. That's a great idea. I think it should be done like that all the time. Why not? I mean, if we're not going to go back to full on Wales versus Campbell, there's no reason to not do it fantasy-wise. Not to mention the fact that ties in with how people watch sports anymore, especially if you're going to try to appeal to the younger generation that's all they do pretty much. So I like that idea. But I liked it better the old way, where they had guys up on stage having a good time, having fun, poking fun at each other, saying stuff. It was all recorded, and everybody had a strange red Solo cup in their hand that were trying to hide it from the camera, but you could clearly see them. And I don't know what was in there. Sprite? Coca-Cola? I don't know.
Mountain Dew Code Red.
Could have been Code Red, yeah. But, yeah, so it was like players having fun. And, the 1 year where Phil Kessel just sat there till the very end, it was like the running joke. No one could pick Phil until the end. So, this one, you had sort of the same thing, only it was just a big production. just a super big production. So here's the thing. I think the NHL did a decent job with the idea and the concept around it and the production of it. But I don't know how many times I have to say ESPN can't get out of their own way when it comes to hockey coverage. It's just bad. It's bad. It's really not good. Audio problems and video problems and queuing stuff up and having the right person talk at the right time and all the bleed over in the background of stuff. Look, you want to try to get the microphones involved with the teams talking to each other. Okay, who are we going to pick next? Who this, that, and the other. But clearly, every time they put a microphone anywhere over, you could hear that it was basically, yeah, this is probably contrived and was made up ahead of time, and they already knew what they were going to do. I mean, Team Toronto Maple Leafs, which was Matthews' team, which became all of the Maple Leafs, and Bieber. I mean, the two of them together looked like they would have rather been anywhere else other than there at the time. Meanwhile, you have Team Hughes, and their celebrity captain is Michael Bublé, who was like super jacked up about everything, like happy to be there. He was having a good old time, and it was great. Like let's have more of that. But it was just, I don't know. And then it was like they couldn't wait to get to a commercial break every time because you got to pay the advertisers got to pay for this. And I mean, it just the coverage was not. It was just not good. It was not good.
Well, I would disagree with you on Bieber. He seemed to be enjoying himself, but maybe I wasn't looking that hard. I mean,
At
there's
the
a
game, yes. At the draft, not so much.
well, there's a saying that like athletes want to be rock stars and rock stars want to be athletes, and that's why they tend to get along real well with each other. But I think the coverage by ESPN, and this was on ESPN too, so they couldn't even be bothered with real ESPN. Just like, yeah, ESPN too. I don't have kids, but my friends with kids now tell me about when their kids become teenagers and how it's like pulling teeth to try to get them to talk, like during dinner time. How was your day? Good. What did you do? Nothing. That's what ESPN's hockey coverage
Do
is
you
like.
have my house bugged?
Yeah, pretty much, right? Everybody I know with kids that are like teenagers, they just tell me the same story. Good, fine. What'd you do? Nothing.
Yeah.
And
The
that's
rare chance I can get all 5 of us sit down for dinner, that's what I do. And it's like an interrogation. I sit there and go around the room like, "What'd you do at school today? Any fun stories? What'd you learn? Were there any fights? What'd you eat for lunch?" And then I go to the next one. Not so much with my oldest because he's in college, but I still ask, "You got any homework? You got any projects you're working on? What's a weird thing your professor said today?" So it's like I try to force them to talk, but yeah, it's bad.
so that's how I feel about the ESPN coverage, right? Where it's like, well, it's 9:59 and 59 seconds, time for college basketball talk. You know what I mean? Like, oh, it's 10 o'clock, hockey's over, folks. You know what I mean? Like, that's
Oh
just how,
yeah, they waste no time flipping
yeah,
it.
they can't wait to
No
get
time.
the F out of like the hockey
Yeah.
coverage and get to anything else. I mean, my joke is like at 5:59, it's still Stephen A. Smith shouting about sports. And then at like 6 o'clock, it's ESPN hockey night tonight. And then at like 10:00 in 1 second, or 10 p.m. and 1 second after that, it's like, oh, now it's time for Sports Center. We're going to start with college basketball.
Well, and now with the rumors that ESPN is getting fully in bed with the NFL going forward, I mean, what does that mean for any other sports? I mean, yeah, college has tons of networks where they can, roll games over onto those networks, but the regular fans, they don't have those. You got to pay for the extra sports packages and everything else. We've talked numerous times about ESPN Plus having all the games and
Mhm.
everything where it's a miniature version of center ice. And those are fine because it's the coverage is the team coverage. So you usually get one or the other team's feeds for home or away, and you can turn it on and you got the television feed of whatever that team is. Unless it's the game of the week that's broadcast on ESPN, or if it's like a spillover special one where it's the actual ESPN coverage, you don't have to deal with that. But with the All-Star game and ESPN having it as two of the broadcasters, TNT obviously they would switch off. So this was ESPN's year to do it. The way they handled that, I just didn't like it. They could have handled it so much better. They could have done the interviews better. The pacing could have been better. That didn't work for me. Carrying forward from the draft into like the actual skills competition and the stuff that was supposed to go on the next day, okay, it was a little different.
But before you get to that, let me just say this about the draft really quick, because I think it was a fun idea.
Great idea, if you ask me.
But first of all, the whole thing was rushed because they wrapped it in like an hour. It just always felt like they were trying to move it along, move it along. The second thing is that the camera angle was just terrible, because in past drafts, they've had a podium. They'd have like the player come up and say, you know, we're going to draft this guy, right? Like Patrick Kane saying, we're going to draft my boy, Dustin Bufflin, right? And you see that it cuts to Jonathan Taves looking disappointed, like, oh, you're not picking me, right? So, I mean, funny stuff like that. But you always had the captain, the assistant captain, and the celebrity captain had their back to the camera. And what was the host, Kevin Weeks?
He was one of them.
Yeah. So then he's interviewing them. So the camera's on him. And then we have the other three people with our backs to us. That wasn't a very good camera angle. You almost needed to have them all facing the same way, or have them come up to the podium saying, yeah, we're taking so-and-so, and then have Weeksy off to the side and say, all right, why did you draft this guy? Because he's my teammate. Oh, okay. That's what I thought, right? And then at the end, when they're like, okay, the last 4 picks, you're going to just open an envelope with the team that you're going to be on. That was just kind of dumb. That was like, well, we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings and make them feel like they were picked last. So the last 4 players are going to find out who drafted them at the same time. But it wasn't even at the same time, because then they were just like, you open your envelope, you open your envelope, you open your envelope. Okay, well, we can infer what team you're on now because you're the last person opening your envelope. So that was kind of dumb. I mean, like anything, it needs work. But I think the bigger problems wasn't for lack of trying. It was because ESPN gave it a 60-minute time slot, and a lot of corners were cut to just make it fit that.
Yeah, and if you're going to do something that's going to be that big of a production and over the top, you need way more time than that.
Mm-hmm.
You can't convey that over in 60 minutes. And I kind of like the tag team that they did between Hockey Night in Canada and the ESPN. So like the hosts of that, you had David Amber and you had Bucci, both like kind of going off each other. And then you had, like you said, you had Kevin Weeks, and you know, you'd occasionally get Emily Kaplan would pop in to do little things here and there and stuff. So overall, they had everything there. Like all the components were there. It was so bad. It was so rough. It was just like I wanted it to be good so bad, and I'm just like, that's how I felt afterward. That's exactly how I felt.
So let's talk about the skills competition. That was pretty cool. My only criticism is that with 12 players, it was just very limited. Like, you know, these are the 12 players that are participating, and it was just like, okay. Like, I get why they use 12 players, because that's a manageable number, and like almost everybody participated in almost everything, and you're getting the best of the very best. But at the same time, I just felt like it was good, but at the time, sometimes I got a little bored of it. I don't know, maybe it's more boring when you have 44 guys competing in it instead of 12.
Yeah, and in years past, not everybody's wanted to compete and everything. They've picked and choose what they wanted. So they made this similar, but they limited the pool of participants. So having 12 guys pick their whatever their favorite 4 events were out of 8 events or whatever, it was like, okay, why isn't Crosby participating? Why isn't, why isn't somebody else out there? I think the biggest disappointment was the fact that Crosby wasn't competing. Now, he wasn't even at the draft, which a bunch of people complained about. And I'm like, okay, this guy does more for hockey and charities and all kinds of stuff. He had a previous engagement. He was practicing in the morning, like trying to stay in shape and stay in game ready and everything else. Leave the guy alone. But anyway, I'm a homer, so people are going to call me a homer and whatever. But he does show up the next time. He's not supposed to participate, and I heard a bunch of people complaining about that. But I'm like, he wasn't picked. Like, this was predetermined ahead of time who was going to be in it. So instead, they get him and Bedard involved, and they're going to be the guys that pass the puck during the one-timers. Which, by the way, no one took a one-timer. Did you notice that?
Mm-hmm.
They were all cradling the puck and basically shooting wrist shots. Like, nobody was taking these like massive slappers like they're supposed to take. It was just like, oh, here's like a gentle pass. And nobody was like firing it on the net. So
Well, the thing is that a one-timer, you can have accuracy with a one-timer, but really the idea of the one-timer is it's about surprising the goalie and just being faster than the goalie, right? And with the wrist shot, it's like basically picking your shot, aiming your shot. It's a more tactical thing. So there was no element of surprise there, right? Because there was no goalie to surprise. They had to hit like that top edge or one of those like corners or whatever. So
they had the car wash flaps across the top where you had to hit it through the different sections and score points.
which I thought was cool. But the thing is that like, so you don't need an element of surprise when you're basically shooting on a shooter tutor. There's not a goalie who's on one side and you're just, your teammate slides it over to you and you just one time it in, right? Like, or you're just hitting it hard and hoping that it just goes through everybody. You know what I mean? This was more like they had to
No,
pick
but
their
if it's
corner.
set up that way, like if you're saying this is the one-timer competition, treat it that way. Do it like it's a one-timer. Yeah, you're not surprising anybody, but at least just take a blast at the shot.
Well, then make it about how hard you hit the puck and not about trying to hit a specific part of the net. Because if you have to hit a specific part of the net, you're going to use whatever shot you're most comfortable with. And if you're trying to just do the hardest shot, the fastest shot, I guess that's the same thing, or like beat a goalie, then, with like a speedy shot, then a slap shot becomes the weapon of choice.
Yeah. I
So
like the hardest shot competition. They kept that, so that was still good. I think a lot of guys think they can shoot harder than they really can. But so that was good. I definitely liked the breakaways, the one-on-ones with the goalies. I
that
liked
was
how they set that
fun.
up this time. Yeah, where they
That was
had,
fun.
the row of pucks close up that they had to take, and then they had to go back to the blue line because you could tell about halfway through those guys were gassed. They were gassed, and most of them were actually trying. At least on that event, there were others that chose not to try at certain parts of the evening. But what are you gonna do? Can't make them try. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And he was just there so he didn't get fined. But
Quit picking on Nikita Kucherov.
I'm not picking on him.
Yes, you
But
are.
he definitely stuck out like a sore thumb and made it known that he wanted nothing to do with anything. He even waved to the crowd when they were booing at him.
Well, they're booing him because there's like a Tampa-Toronto rivalry. Because Tampa usually finishes at the top of the pack, and Toronto usually just ekes into the playoffs. So
Or maybe,
they're
I don't know,
always
you pay hundreds of dollars for a ticket to watch this guy go out there and dog it. I
they're
know it's
not
an
there to
all-star
watch.
skills competition, but whatever.
They're there to watch Austin Matthews.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So
But yeah,
all
I
right.
liked all the events. I thought they were set up well. I thought the coverage was a little better on the skills competition. I think they could have done maybe a little more with the playing around kind of thing, but I think that one was a lot better. I like the direction they took the skills competition. There wasn't a whole lot of like corny, foofy things like shooting pucks at a surfboard and dunk tank and stuff. Not that that's bad, but these are skills that are foundational type skills of the hockey player. So if you want the best hockey players to compete at what they're good at, certainly one of those things is not a dunk tank. It's skating super fast, accuracy, hard shots, all of that kind of stuff. So I think everything integrated that, and that, especially at the end, that obstacle course, the way they had that set up, that was pretty cool. I like
That was ridiculous. It was cool, but it was just too much.
it. Looked pretty difficult. And again, guys were gassed at that one too. Yeah, so skills, it was better. You could tell they were starting to warm up to it as far as the production crew went. But then we got the actual games.
Oh, yeah. So let me give just the score recaps of those games. So, as you know, it was they're 3-on-3 games. You have 3 games, 2 10-minute halves for 20 minutes total. So, game 1, Team McDavid beat Team McKinnon 4-3 in the shootout. Game 2, Team Matthews beat Team Hughes 6-5 in the shootout. Game 3, Team Matthews beat Team McDavid 7-4. And the All-Star MVP was Austin Matthews, who had 2 goals and 1 assist in that third game. Some people were thinking it might be Alex DeBrincat because he had 3 goals and an assist, but 2 goals and an assist in the final game is probably a little more important than what the Cat did, although DeBrincat was pretty awesome in the All-Star game. But the other games were won in the shootout, so they were really close. And this one wasn't as close if they won by 3 goals, but it was still pretty close. I mean, I think the games were entertaining. I watched them. I watched the first one live. The other 2 I watched like the next day because I had plans already. I mean, I thought it was okay. I was entertained. I liked it. I still like the 3-on-3 format. I mean, it moves quickly. I mean, there was one game where there were like 3 goals in an 18-second span. I mean, it was just ridiculous. And that's what we want to see. We want to see the skating and the scoring, and that's what it's about, and that's really okay.
Well, in the first game too, I mean, Team McKinnon was up 3-1 the entire game. And then at the very end, with like 4 minutes left, McDavid pulls the goaltender. And they scored 2 goals with the goalie pulled, tied the game, and took it into the shootout. So that was kind of exciting. Like, you thought it was over, and the whole time I'm sitting there watching, like, these guys don't care until the very last game. It's like the last couple years. Like, nobody cares until like the last game, and then they're playing their butts off in the last game because they want to split the money. But the games were good. I will say this, the coverage was a lot better. I wasn't a big fan of the studio coverage because I feel like those guys were just phoning it in, and most of the time they didn't know what to do or say. Like, it wasn't scripted at all, and they had no idea what to talk about, so they just made stuff up. But I do feel like that a lot of times when Messier's talking. Like, sometimes I don't think he knows where he is, but not sure if that's like long-term CTE or whatever, but could just be unrelated, or that he's just bad on TV. Could be that too. I don't know.
Messier only works.
PK.
Messier only works as an analyst when he has Chelios to riff off of. Because
I think he has to have that foil that complements each other. Because him and PK don't work.
Right. Well, no, but Chelios and Messier are friends, and they like each other, and they like to reminisce, and they kind of have this nice kind of back and forth thing going. It's not like over the top crazy. It's just kind of like a nice rapport, you know?
Yeah.
PK never fit in with Chelios and Messier, and now with Chelios not there, there's even more of a stark contrast between Messier, who seems very understated, and PK, who's like PK, you know? What was it though? Changing the subject for a second though. I think it was maybe it was last year, maybe when Chelios was still on the ESPN broadcasts, and Messier said something about winning a championship, and Chelios talked about winning a Stanley Cup or something, and PK said, "Oh, thanks guys, thanks for rubbing it in," and he was joking, but Messier just said very like matter of factly, "Well, you go ahead." And he wasn't being a jerk like I have a championship and you don't, but he basically like he was just like, "Well, if you want to talk about it, talk about it." And PK grinned because he didn't win a Stanley Cup, but I mean, he's been a champion at other levels, I'm sure. But I mean, Messier has a sense of humor, but he's very understated. You know what I mean? Like, he needs, like you said, he needs that foil. PK, I feel like, should be hosting a 30-minute show. Like, almost like a coach's corner type of thing.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. He's a personality that fits in like that, or be a host of some other pre-done show. Like, not that Ice Time is for everybody on NHL Network, but it's more of like the kids show. It's like NBA Inside Stuff was. something similar to that, where he like interviews players and talks to people and goes around and does, like a more of a personality type show, like human interest type stuff than that. Because it may not be the same one you're talking about, but I remember the one. It was probably like right before playoffs started, or maybe it was during playoffs. They had the Stanley Cup in the studio, and Bessier was like, he's like, now PK, when you pick up the Stanley Cup, not that you had an opportunity during your career, but you never grab it by here. You grab it by the bottom. And Chelios is like standing off to the side, just laughing because they're trolling him, talking, this is how you pick up a Stanley Cup. And it was pretty funny, but that was last year. So
Yeah.
I could still see that animosity that's there. And I don't think PK doesn't like Messier. I just think Messier just doesn't know how to deal with PK. I just think he doesn't get it. And that's part of the issue. So like they clash. Whether the tension's there or not, visually, as a hockey fan, you can see it.
You know, would get along really well. I think PK and Roenick would get along pretty well. I think they're both like kind of silly.
Maybe, but they're
Maybe.
they're two alphas, so that might be tough.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
Although it seems to work for TNT because they have a host, a B, and a bunch of A's, like up against each other.
It's the host's job to keep everybody's ego in check and corral them and focus them, and that's what he does really well. We're talking about Liam on TNT.
Yeah, and the TNT broadcast works. With those personalities, it just somehow it works, and I think it's a much smoother. I mean, even when it goes bad, it's still good because they're able to riff enough on it to ignore, like, don't look over here, look over here.
Well, you feel like they're having fun. And
Right.
on ESPN, you feel like they want to have fun, but they're not allowed to, or they don't want to have fun in Messier's case.
Yep. It's like over here, they're having fun talking about the game they love. And over here, they're working. And there's a staunch contrast between the two.
But I would argue
ESPN loses it for me.
I would argue that on TNT, Gretzky wants to not have fun. He wants to work, but they kind of force him to have fun. And so he kind of goes along with it. You know what I mean? Like, you ever kind of get that vibe a little bit? Because
in the very beginning, I did, but not anymore. He's loosened way up. And the more interviews and stuff that he's done in the last probably year or two, because he's been out in the open more and you see him more often, I think he's gotten more comfortable in front of the camera, and it's worked out, I think, better for him. So to me, that works. But ESPN's coverage of the game, like, it was fine. Like, the announcing was good. I didn't have a problem with that. I didn't them keep cutting to the benches all the time and shoving a microphone in everybody's face every 5 seconds. I was getting a little tired of that. But as long as they would talk to the celebrity captains, like, I was fine, because like the players seemed annoyed by getting the microphone put in their face. But like the celebrity captains, they still talk. Like Will Arnett, of course he's gonna crack jokes and do whatever.
Yeah, he was great. He was great.
I mean, I don't know what weird, wild, endangered animal Bieber killed to make that coat of his, but that was something. That red and pink thing, furry thing that he was wearing.
Yeah, that was whatever,
I found out you can buy that coat.
Oh, I'm sure you can. Yeah, no, because he talked about the designer who made it. So he was clearly shilling for the designer and that coat.
It's on sale, 50% off. You can buy one today. Only $2,400.
Oh, is that all?
That's all.
Well, PK said he wanted one, so maybe he'll buy one.
Oh, I mean, he can afford it.
All right, so we've talked about this for half an hour now. Can we move on?
We could have moved on 29 minutes ago.
Okay, so they're going to replace next year's All-Star Game with something called the Four Nations Face-Off, which is going to be a tournament between teams of players from the USA, Canada, Sweden, and Finland. So 4 teams. Never mind if you're a Czech player. Never mind if you're a Russian player. Never mind if you're another ethnicity or nationality because you're not going to be in this tournament. It's set to take place February 12th through 20th of 2025. It's going to be 7 games played over that span. So I don't know all the logistics of it, but it sounds to me kind of like a Canada Cup or World Cup of hockey, but smaller and over just like 9 days instead of like 2 weeks. I don't know if I like this idea as like a mid-season break. You know what? Try it once. If it sucks, don't do it again. That's the thing. Like the whole Wales Conference, Campbell Conference, or Eastern Conference, Western Conference format was getting old, and then they did North America versus the world, and then that got old, and then they went back to this, and then they did that. And you know what I mean? So it's okay to mix up all-star games. I mean, once upon a time, it used to be the all-star players versus the previous year's Stanley Cup champion. That worked for the time. I could never see that happening now in the NHL. I would love that, but it probably wouldn't happen now. So, this might be a good idea. Really, it's just kind of to get people's appetites whetted for the 2026 and 2030 Olympics, which will allow NHL players back into it for the ice hockey tournament portion of the Winter Olympics. So we're going to have kind of like a mini Olympics next year, Olympic ice hockey. And then the next year after that, we'll have like the 2026 Winter Olympics. And we'll have a return of NHLers in that. And that'll be exciting because it'll be the first Olympics to have Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews and a whole bunch of guys whose careers have started since the 2014 Winter Olympics. What are your thoughts on all of this?
Well, yeah, and like you said, it's kind of like a primer to get ready for the international tournament. And people are always clamoring for these best on best tournaments, and you got to do something. I think the Four Nations tournament is a good idea. The fact that they're excluding all the other countries, I mean, yeah, I get it. It's logistics and all that kind of stuff, but you got some of the best players in all of the NHL that aren't going to be eligible to play because they simply come from not one of those 4 countries. So, but I think I'll probably be more on board the closer you get to it, the more excitement's around it. Right now, just looking at it on paper, you're like, huh, interesting. Why would we not have all the rest of these countries involved in there? But again, I get it. It's a logistics thing. It would make sense to do it this way. And since they don't know where they're going to have it, I mean, obviously it's going to have to be somewhere in Canada or the US or maybe both. But I like the idea. I mean, I do. Again, I wish they would go back to the World Cup. I think that was fun. But I don't think we're ever going to see that again. Just because of the fact that we're going to be involved more in the Olympics as long as they keep paying the bill. And that was the key. Saying that we're going to go back to the Olympics, because every time the Olympics comes around, what is the argument? Is the NHL going to participate? And we wait and wait and wait, and we're listening for Bill Daly to say something and Bettman to say something, and you never hear anything. And they're like, oh, we're looking into it. We're looking into it. We're trying to figure it out. You know what it always boils down to? It always boils down to who's going to pay for it. The NHL does not, under any circumstance, want to foot the bill for anything involved with these international tournaments that aren't run by the NHL. So the Olympics, anything IIHF, they don't want any part of it. So if you're going to take players, you're going to pay for the travel, you're going to pay for their housing, you're going to pay for their food, you're going to pay for all of that. If it's coming out of the IIHF, they have no problem with letting the players play. But if it's a hint that the NHL has to pay for some of it, that's when the argument's always like, we don't know. We don't know if we can go. I don't know if there's time. We don't know. And you run into that. So it is interesting, though, that when they were talking with the State of the Union address that they always give during the All-Star game, that going to the Olympics, not next year, but the following year, it's in Milan. And the hockey portion of it's going to be played on NHL size ice rather than international size ice. I found that to be a very interesting tidbit of information that was thrown out there. Not that
Well,
it
why not? I
tips
mean,
the scales a little bit more towards the North American players, but let's face it, the North American players are better anyway.
I mean, it is kind of interesting when they have to play on international ice because that changes the dynamics of the game a little bit. It opens it up a little bit more, and there's been the argument that the European players, especially the non-NHLers, are used to that the 200 by 100 ice surface instead of the 200 by 85 foot ice surface. But I mean, I don't think it really matters. The great players are going to adapt no matter what. Whether it's a 100-foot rink by 50-foot rink or 200 by 85 or 200 by 100 or whatever. Hell, if they used a bandy rink, which those are huge, those are like soccer fields, I'm sure they'd figure it out. I'm sure Crosby and McDavid would just make longer passes to each other and they'd figure it out. You know what I mean? So, like, people always think things have to be standardized all the time. Like, oh, the Tampa Bay Lightning's first Stanley Cup championship doesn't count because it was in the bubble. Well, guess what? Everybody played in the bubble. So yeah, it does count because that's what the rules are, right? I mean, just at the time, that's the rules. Everybody plays by this set of rules, this set of constraints, you know? So it is interesting, though, that they'll use the NHL ice, but it kind of makes sense, too.
Well, I thought the ice size was kind of significant, but I guess it's not a big deal.
No.
I don't ever remember them playing in the Olympics. I don't ever remember them playing on smaller ice.
Well, I mean,
this might be the first time.
2010 in Vancouver, 2002 in.
I thought the Vancouver ice was bigger.
No, that was at GM Place.
Yeah, but I thought they expanded the rink. I thought they expanded the rink because doesn't International Ice Hockey Federation like dictate that they have to be the 197 by 98?
No, but they've made exceptions for this. Yeah.
Again, I've slept since then, so I must forget.
I mean, I could be wrong too, and I'm saying that just so I don't have to edit out that part of the podcast later on. Like, oh, but no, there have been times where they've made exceptions. Basically, if everybody agrees, then it's cool. So one thing we talked about when talking about when to do our next Setrospective or what to do our next Setrospective about was Tim suggested that we do a set that actually included Olympic players in the card set. And I thought that was a great idea. Now, a couple of years back, we did a podcast about the 1993-94 Fleer power play set. I don't feel like my opinion has changed much on that set because I love it. It's like probably my second favorite set from the 93-94 season. So it didn't really make sense to do another podcast about something that we did a podcast about not too long ago. But Tim pointed out that the 93-94 Fleer Ultra set also had cards of Olympic players. There were 20 cards of Team Canada players, 20 cards of Team USA players. Now, these were national team players who played for their respective national teams during the 93-94 season. Not all the guys in each set actually ended up on the Olympic team. One that I'll point out is Ian Moran, who was on Team USA. As you know, he played for the Penguins. I talked to him. Penguins legend. And I talked to him a number of years ago about that. And he said he was the last guy cut for the Olympic team. He said, but then the next day the Penguins signed him. So he said, it worked out, you know, because then he was in the AHL, and then like a year later he was in the NHL. Things happen for a reason. Things work out for a reason. And so Fleer Ultra, just to give you the skinny on this set, this was the second year that Fleer produced its Ultra set for hockey. It was a 500 card set. Cards 1 through 250 were in Series 1. Cards 251 through 500 were in Series 2. This was 50 cards more than the previous year. So the previous year when Fleer Ultra launched in 92-93, it was a 450 card set. Now, Fleer continued to make its Ultra set until the 96-97 season. And then the Fleer Ultra brand was reprised in 2005, 2006 by Upper Deck, because Upper Deck bought basically the logo and the name Fleer and can make Ultra cards and so forth. So, there were a lot of inserts. I'll just run through these real quick, and then we'll talk about what we actually think about the set. But there were 12 Adam Oates career highlights card. He was kind of like the poster boy for 93-94 Fleer Ultra, whereas Jeremy Roenick was like the poster boy for 92-93 Fleer Ultra. So there were 12 Adam Oates highlights cards. Cards 1 through 10 were found in packs. 11 and 12 you had to mail away for. 10 All-Rookies, 18 All-Stars, 6 Award winners, 10 Premier Pivots, 10 Prospects, 10 Red Light Specials, 10 Scoring Kings, 10 Speed Merchants, 20 Wave of the Future, and it was also possible to get an Adam Oates autographed card. Tim, do you want to guess what the odds are of pulling an Adam Oates autographed card?
In 1993-94?
Yes.
1 out of 10,000.
You Googled it. You Googled it.
I didn't, but I'm just guessing.
Yeah, 1 in 10,000 packs had an autographed Adam Oates hockey card. 1 in 10,000 packs. And I cry if I don't get 2 or 3 autographs in a box. And here you had to buy. Well, you didn't have to buy. It was kind of like if you got one, it was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I mean, packs at the time were about, I think a fat pack was like $279 or $299, depending on the series. There were some fat packs with 17 cards, some with 19 cards. And then I want to say the packs were like maybe $249. They were definitely north of $2 at this point, or like $2 and up. So this wasn't like a $100 a box kind of product or whatever. So anyway.
Well, I know the rookie inserts, those were only in the jumbo packs.
Okay.
That was like the only way you could have got them. And I think those were 19 cards in a jumbo pack. But
okay, yeah.
Do you have one of those Adam Oates autos?
I don't. I've never had.
I've never seen one.
Well, I've never seen one, but I've never really had the incentive to buy one. Now, the Jeremy Roenick autographs, I think I have about 4 of them. And then
I've seen those.
I've ended up with the duplicate of one, just that I purchased. So I
come across the Roenick ones every once in a while at a show. I'll see one in a case. I'll be like, huh, those were hard to find. Mm-hmm. I've never once seen an Adam Oates one. Mm-hmm. And is it because Roenick's way more popular than Adam Oates? Because I will throw out the fact that one's in the Hall of Fame and one isn't. But, that might be political rather than not to diminish anything Adam Oates ever did in his career, but still, you hear much more discussion and people talk about JR than you do about Adam Oates. So I'm just saying, I've never physically actually seen one. I'm sure if I Googled it or went on eBay, I'd find a bunch of them, but I've never seen one live. That's just me.
So did you collect this set back in 93-94?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I did.
What was your incentive to collect this set?
Well, I liked the previous year's version of Ultra. And for some reason, I liked, even though it looks similar, I liked the design of the 93-94 set better than the 92-93. Because 92-93 had that kind of like blue ice kind of border on the bottom. Mm-hmm. And that was fine. It was kind of cool. But I like this one better because it's more of a kind of a grayish ice looking.
It's like a marble texture.
Yeah, it kind of looks like your granite countertop that you would find in a kitchen. And that continues over onto the back too with part of the design pattern on the backs of the cards as well. But I like the looks of these better for some reason. And when I found them, these were ones that I would pick up. Like if I found them in the store, I would buy packs. And I tried to put together the set. I never was able to hand collate my own set out of it. Never did track down all the Team USA and Team Canada cards. and then eventually gave up trying. So this is one that I think I have probably half of it sitting in a box somewhere.
So, for the very same reason that you mentioned is why I did not collect this set. Because I was a big fan of the 92-93 Fleer Ultra hockey set. I loved everything about it. In fact, when I ranked the 92-93 sets, I have a Puck Junk article where I ranked all the 92-93 sets. I put it as the second best set that year. For 93-94, I put this as the second worst set for two reasons. The first reason is this just basically feels like the 92-93 design just improved on. But I remember buying a couple of packs, looking at it and saying, you know what, this just looks like the same thing. Like you have a diagonal stripe at the bottom, making the bottom border of the card. Okay, you have a nice action photo on the front. You got the same logo on the front. But then on the back, you had the head and shoulder shot and then the small action shot superimposed over a hockey rink. Now in 92-93, it was like an illustration of a hockey rink, which was kind of cool because it was different. And then this time, it was like just a photo of a hockey rink, which is okay. Kind of reminds me of those 66, 67 Topps cards that had like the TV border, but then like the generic hockey rink in the background. Kind of reminds me of that a little bit. You had one line of stats and like their totals, but like even like the nameplate with like the bevel, it just basically looks like they said, hey, how do we make this design better? And that's what they did. And so to me, it just felt like the same set, which is why I didn't buy it. And then the other reason was because there was a lot of other stuff that I wanted to collect. Like I was always all in on Upper Deck every year. And we talked about 93-94 Upper Deck in our last show. And I explained there why I liked it so much. But then also Fleer Power Play was another set that I really loved that year. Leaf was another set that I really loved that year. I even liked Donruss, but I just felt like it was too similar to Leaf, and Leaf was a better set to me. And I mean, even that year, I went after Stadium Club and I went after Topps Premier. And this set, I bought like a pack or two, and that was it. And it wasn't until like the mid 2000s when I got back into collecting hockey cards, I probably bought this full set for like $5 or $8 or something. I mean, I was buying up sets from the 90s for like between $4 and $10. And it was just like a feeding frenzy of like, oh yeah, I never got the 95-96 Fleer Ultra set. I'll buy it for $6. And oh, I never got 93-94 Fleer Ultra, and I'll pay $8 for that. And that's probably what I did pay for it. Now it's worth a bit more, especially if you can find them not bricked.
See, I just felt like, to me, Fleer Ultra was kind of like more of a premium product. And at that point, I had bought Upper Deck in 1990. I had bought it in 91. I had bought it in 92. And at this point, I was like, hey, this is a little nicer product. And the previous year was kind of cool too. And like you said, how do you improve on this? Well, you basically make it again, change the colors, double the gloss, and put gold foil stamping on it. And that is essentially the difference between 92-93 and 93-94, I think.
I thought 92-93 had gold foil stamping.
Yeah, I think there's way more on this. It's like on the front and the backs on these, on some of the cards, especially on the inserts.
Oh, on the inserts, yeah. But I mean, I'm looking at the base cards and there's no gold foil stamping on the back.
They did it on front and back on a lot of the inserts.
Gotcha. I understand.
So even though I liked the year before, I just felt like this design was nicer. And I don't know, I have some weird thing for those Premier pivots for some reason. I don't know why I like those.
You do or do not like them?
No, I do. I don't know why I like them. Those in the red light specials, like anytime I see them, like the inserts, if I see them in like a quarter box, I'll pick them up. I'm not sure why. Maybe like on the Premier pivots, maybe it's because they have that like motion in the background where it's kind of all blurred out because it looks like stuff's moving. And then you have the player kind of focused on the front. And then the red light specials is kind of like that Olin Mills sort of thing where you got the player and then they're superimposed close-up shot up in the corner. It's kind of faded out around the edges.
But what we're oddly wondering about is how you feel about speed merchants.
Well, you harken back to, when was that? 2017, when we did our dumb names for card sets show. I believe that one was one of the ones on the list, because they're speed merchants, so they're selling speed. Is that what they're doing? I call that a drug dealer, but that's just me. That's how I grew up, is calling speed merchants drug dealers. Not a fan of the name. The idea was it's supposed to be like the fastest skaters and scorers or whatever in the NHL. Yeah. The name could use some work. And they regurgitated that name a few times because that set came back. And I think the Premier Pivots did too.
Yeah, it did. But yeah, like, so speed merchants, just so they weren't really about drug dealers. They were about fast players like Pavel Bure, Timu Solane, and Sergei Fedorov. And it had like players with like a motion blur, which was pretty cool for the time. You know, now it's pretty easy to do that in Photoshop. Like I said, I passed on it back then. I don't want to say now I like it. I mean, now I just have it because I try to have everything from the 90s. But like, what was kind of funny was that there was like a promo sheet of cards. It was like a 9-panel promo sheet that had like cards of, let's see, Joe Juneau, Sergei Fedorov, Matt Sundin, Jeremy Roenick, Mark Recchi, Felix Potvin, Alexei Kovalev, and Doug Gilmour. Oh, and they're not perforated either. You can't really tear them apart. And in the middle, there's just like the logo, and it says, "You can't buy a better hockey card." I kind of laugh at that because it was like, that year, I could buy a better hockey card. I mean, yeah, these are nice cards. The problem is that everybody else upped their game. Like, if you think about like 92, 93 tops and 93, 94 tops, tops upped its game. If you think about 92, 93 Stadium Club and 93, 94 Stadium Club, again, top upped its game. Upper Deck upped its game. You had Leaf come out, which was like brand new. So it's kind of like you had like new players in that territory who were like better than everything else that was out there. And then like the other guys kind of upped their game, and Flair Ultra just kind of did like the same thing that they did the previous year. And so to me, I felt like they kind of got like a little left behind. But then like the next years, they started doing full bleed photos, and, you know, they changed and got better, I think. But that's just my opinion for what it's worth.
I mean, you got to respect the original, sure. And yeah, you're right. There were more options available that year of other products to go after. The Leaf set's a great set. I mean, I don't know if we talked about the Leaf set on a show before.
Yeah, right
I
before
think we did.
Christmas, dude.
Oh, that's right. It wasn't that long ago. I mean, that's a great set. But again, I do like the Ultra set. And you were saying earlier about how much packs were. $2.69. That was the 17 card packs.
Right.
And those were pre-stamped that price too from the manufacturer. So that was the MSRP on those. I swear I paid $250 for these. I don't remember the price actually being on them. So maybe I was buying different packs, or maybe there was a different option available. But I used to be able to get these at the local Kmart, which tells you how old I am, since there aren't any Kmarts anymore. But it was a good set. I never remember buying boxes, but I would go back and I would say, if I was to estimate how many I bought, I probably bought 3 boxes worth of these.
Wow.
With the number of packs that I would buy.
But you said you never built a set, though.
Nope. I think I tried to, but I never could get all of the, like I said, I never got all the Team USA or Team Canada.
So you bought Series 1 and Series 2?
I did.
Wow, okay.
And I think I was still missing at one point like 4 or 5 of the just base cards.
Yeah, I was so
Collation was never great. You would get doubles in a box. Lots of doubles, in fact.
So I want to point out the notable rookie cards, and then I want to ask you something about some of the rookies. But okay, so the notable rookies in this set: Jason Arnott, Adrian Aucoin, Darren McCarty, Chris Osgood, and Jocelyn Tebow. But now there are 3 kind of interesting rookie cards in this set. Can you guess who they are? One of them you're going to probably know right away.
Who did you say the notable ones were?
The notable ones, as far as like players who had decent to great NHL careers: Jason Arnott, Adrian Aucoin, Darren McCarty, Chris Osgood, Jocelyn Tebow. Now, by the way, there's like 68 rookie cards in the set, because a lot of those Team USA and Team Canada guys, those were like their rookie cards, like Adrian Aucoin, for instance, who was on Team Canada.
Right. You're saying these are significant ones, or these are just other interesting ones that aren't?
So now there are 3 other ones that I want to mention that are of guys who did not have significant NHL careers, but also have rookie cards in this set. And I want to talk about them because the 3 of them are interesting and they have rookie cards in this set.
Well, it's not Chris Simon then, because I was going to say him. I think he's in there. Didn't good old Brent Gretzky, the not so great one, have a rookie card in there too?
Wow.
I think I remember Brent Gretzky having a rookie card, because if I'm not mistaken, he was on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Like I could picture the card in my head. I swear it was from that set.
Yeah, Brent Gretzky had a rookie card. And who was the other one you said? Chris Simon?
Chris Simon's in that set. I know that.
Yeah, Chris Simon also has a rookie card.
Laviolette's in there.
Yeah.
Right?
Peter Laviolette.
He's got a Team USA card, I think. Yeah.
Yes, he was the captain of Team USA during the 1994 Winter Olympics. What's interesting is that Laviolette played 12 games for the Rangers in 88-89, and he didn't have any NHL cards, because when you only played 12 games during the 88-89 season, you didn't get a hockey card. Now, if you played 12 games in the 90-91 season, you probably got 11 different hockey cards somehow, right? Because that's just what it was like. But he didn't play in the NHL after those 12 games in 88-89, but because he has a card in the 93-94 Fleer Ultra set, that's considered his rookie card, even though he's not pictured with an NHL team, because of the weird ways people classify rookie cards, right?
Yeah, especially back then.
Yeah. So he has a rookie card in this set, as well as Fleer Power Play, which also has cards of Team USA and Team Canada players. He also has a card in the 93-94 Topps Premier Team USA inserts, but that's an insert card, and most people don't consider insert cards rookie cards or potential to be rookie cards. I do, but that's just me. But yeah, Peter Laviolette has a card in this set, and as you know, he went on to become a very good NHL head coach. Coincidentally, he's now coaching the Rangers 35 years after he played for the Rangers.
Isn't the younger, lesser Lindros in there too?
Yeah, Brent Lindros is also in the set. I mean, there's a lot of interesting cards. I mean, not a rookie card, but they have a card of Brian Trottier, who made that short comeback in like 93-94.
He was on the Penguins the previous years for the Cups.
Right, but I mean, his last stat on the back is 91-92, because then he retired for 92-93, and then he came back for 93-94.
There's another coach in there too. Jim Montgomery, maybe?
Yeah, Jim Montgomery has a rookie card in this set as well.
Both coaches in the All-Star game.
Yeah, how about that, right? So can I tell you who these last 2 interesting players are? Because I don't think you'll ever guess them in I won't
if
say
they're not those guys, I probably won't guess.
Okay.
So.
One is goaltender Dave Littman.
I never would have guessed that one.
Yeah. Littman played 1 game for the Sabres in 90-91. He played 1 game for the Sabres in 91-92. And then he played 1 game for the Lightning in 92-93. And then he has a rookie card in 93-94 Fleer Ultra. Actually, that's his only rookie card. That's his only rookie card. That's his only card that's not an insert, that's not a minor league set, and that's not a team set, right? Because he has like minor league cards, and he has 2 common minor sets, classic draft picks and edge ice, and then he has an all rookie in the same set. So you're probably wondering, Sal, why are you talking about David Littman? I'm going to tell you why. Because after he retired from playing pro hockey in 2001, he went on to work for Electronic Arts in part of their EA Sports division. And he basically went to them and said, hey, I played pro hockey. I feel like I could help make your hockey video games better. And from what I understand, they started him out as a game tester, which is the worst job you can have working for a video game company. But eventually he moved up and then he became the producer for the NHL games from like 2007 to 2014. And on his LinkedIn page, he even talks about how during that time, NHL 07, NHL 08, NHL 09, whatever, they'd win like all these video game awards and be recognized as like best sports video game of the year and stuff like that. So David Littman was a producer at EA Sports. That's just kind of an interesting thing, especially if you like video games or hockey video games and hockey cards. That's just kind of a neat little crossover, wouldn't you think?
Only Sal Berry would know that tidbit of information.
But you feel better knowing that tidbit of information, don't you?
Yep. And just like our show about Leaf only a mere month ago, I will probably forget that tidbit as soon as we hang up.
Okay. So the other
I only
player,
have so much room in this big dome of mine. I can't fit all of that in there.
listen, I'm the guy who like would pore over the instruction books and find like names of, oh, that guy played in the NHL, right? Maybe I could talk to him about this game or whatever. So, when I saw his name pop up in like certain NHL game instruction book credits, I'd be like, that guy played in the NHL. Also, I remember his 93-94 classic card because he was wearing a Rochester Americans jersey, which is a very nice looking jersey. So the other player I want to point out, rookie card for this guy, and he actually did play in the NHL, but the card doesn't picture him as an NHL player. It pictures him as a Team Canada player, and that is Brad Turner. And now you're thinking, why would I care about Brad Turner, right? 3 games for the Islanders, I think in 91-92 was his NHL call-up. Turner went on to work in movies and TV shows. He was one of the hockey coordinators for the hockey film Mystery Alaska, and he was also the hockey double for Russell Crowe's character in Mystery Alaska. He then went on to work in a bunch of TV shows and movies. Like he would like maybe play a hockey double in something or a referee, like he was a referee in the Mighty Ducks Game Changers TV show. He does like a lot of stunts where he like plays like a cop or like a SWAT team guy or like a thug, but he's also acted in some TV movies or some movies in like small roles and stuff like that. So he's one of those rare people that has a page on HockeyDB and he has a page on IMDb. So if you like movies, you like hockey movies, Brad Turner is kind of significant in that realm.
Wow. That's another one of those weird, obscure things that just, that's not even on the same clipboard. Like that's somewhere else, man. That's great information. I like that.
Far out, man.
See, you're not going to get that on any other show. See, people, if you're listening, you just got awarded. That's like getting a big bowl of ice cream without even asking for it.
So I interviewed Brad Turner when I did my article for the Hockey News on the making of Mystery Alaska. I watched the credits. I look for names of hockey people, hockey coordinators, hockey whatever. I look them up on HockeyDB. I try to find them. And I located him and, we talked and he basically told me, yeah, I played 3 games for the Islanders. And I would start looking to see, does this guy have any hockey cards? And it's like, oh my God, he actually has a rookie card, even though it's not with the Islanders. So yeah, it is just kind of interesting. We think of like these athletes as like they play hockey and then they retire and then they go into finance or accounting, or maybe if they're one of the more interesting ones, they go into color commentary or whatever, right? Studio analyst, color commentator, between the glass reporter, whatever, right? They still stay somehow involved in the game in like the media aspect, right? But then once in a while, you get somebody who just is like, now he does acting and he still does acting. And then you have, like I said, like Dave Littman, who worked for a video game company for a number of years and took what was already a great thing and made it better. And that being the NHL hockey games. Yeah. And then, of course, you got Peter Laviolette, who I think will be in the Hall of Fame as a coach one day.
I used to do that kind of stuff for music. I would read the liner notes of everything I ever bought, whether it was a record, a tape, eventually CDs. I'd read all the liner notes, the lyrics to the songs, but everything, like, you know, who the director was and the producer and the sound engineer and this and that. And yeah, I'd go through all of them. And then I would look at other records and CDs and stuff that I had and see if they had the same producers or if they had the same sound engineers and where it was recorded and all that kind of stuff, just to kind of get a feel for like, this was recorded here. And here's another album that sounds sort of like that one. It was also recorded there. You know, back before something called the internet existed where you could just look that up. So yeah, your knowledge of this stuff and the way you tie all of that in, like it's just a giant puzzle that you would never hear. And honestly, who's going to bring those guys up ever? Those are common cards that are getting thrown in a box and no one ever sees them ever again. Right? Only here will you hear a feature on players like that. I mean, really, it's true. Like nowhere else are you going to hear that kind of stuff. And I think that's cool because you have that knowledge and I have some knowledge, but man, you got me beat on that one.
Well, we like different things and we like some of the same things, you know, but I mean, if we all knew the same things, life would be kind of boring. So it's always interesting to find out those things, you know, those stories behind the stories, you know, and of course, I like to tell those kinds of stories, but it's always just kind of fun to find those connections. And especially like when you find out what a player's been doing after they retire, right? Because then you just kind of forget about them.
Well, especially like bit part guys and role player type guys that may or may not have gotten a shot in the big show. I mean, sometimes these guys like toiled in the minor leagues for a long time, but they were super popular or super pivotal on their teams that they played on, but yet hockey fans don't know who they are. So I think that's good that we shine a light on that. Another thing about this set, my criticism of that set, because even back then I collected Penguin cards, there were no rookies for the Penguins in that set. And you brought up Ian Moran because he eventually signed with the Penguins, but he wasn't considered a Penguin in the set because he was in the Team USA cards. But yeah, there were no Penguins in this set, like off of the checklist, but there was a card of Mike Ramsey in a Penguins uniform, which I always found funny. Because to me, looking at the cards, now again, much younger at that time, looking at all these players on that roster, like the Marty Strakas and the Kevin Stevens and Tocchet was on that team and Mario and Yager. And so you see the players and you're like, you relate to the players at that age. And I always remember seeing that Mike Ramsey card and looking at him going, how old is this guy? This guy's super old. And that's one card that always popped out in my head is the Mike Ramsey card.
Dude, you know who looked super old on a hockey card to me back when I was a kid? I'm going to tell you the card and you're going to know exactly which one I'm talking about. 1991 Bowman Reggie Lemelin.
Oh, yes.
Close up side of his head, like he's sitting on the bench. He looks like Mr. Wilson from Dennis the Menace.
Yeah, I can see that.
He's got the big mustache and the receding headline and kind of a scowl on his face a little bit. I'm just like, wow, that dude's like 100.
He looks like a coach on that card.
Yeah.
Like he looks like he's sitting there looking out, like scowling at the guys on the ice for whatever reason. They did something and they shouldn't have done something.
Yeah, like that Mike Babcock look of disapproval or that Mike Keenan look of disapproval.
But the Ramsey card, and I think it might just be the mustache. Like the mustache that he had on that card threw me off. But Mike Ramsey, like who thinks of Mike Ramsey as a Penguin? Certainly not I.
Well, you know what's annoying about this set is that the cards in the first series are not organized by team, but the cards in the second series are organized by team.
Whereas that's weird, isn't it?
It is, because like 92, 93, they were organized by team, and I liked that. And then 93, 94, I'm like paging through this, and I'm like, okay, we got a Bruin who's now with the Stars. We got an Oiler, and we're like, whoa. And then so that just makes it harder to like find a certain card of a certain player because they're not in any sort of team order. So yeah,
I wonder why they did that.
I don't know.
Like, what was the reasoning? You go through the set checklist and it's just random, and then all of a sudden you're going to make series 2 and you go, what? Let's group these all together.
You know, one thing I noticed though, as far as teams go, is that most of the team sets have between 18 and 20 cards each. The Panthers have 14 cards, which is low. There's no Panthers in Series 1. There's only 2 Ducks in Series 1, and it's just players who've been drafted, so they're still in their old uniforms, and there's a little tag that says expansion draft on it, like a little pink oval that says expansion draft. So there's no Panthers in Series 1. There's only 14 Panthers overall in the set, but most of the teams have like between 18 and 20 cards each. So it's pretty consistent with its representation of U.S. teams, Canadian teams, and whatnot. And I thought that was, I don't want to say kind of nice, but yeah, I guess kind of nice.
Do you consider the checklist as cards of the players that are pictured on them?
I consider them as cards of the players pictured, but I found it really annoying that Trading Card DB counted the checklists because it mentioned Pittsburgh Penguins, so it counted the 2 checklists as Penguins cards, even though it might picture a penguin, it might not. But like, yeah, like
they do that with a lot on there. You'll find that a lot on the checklist. If it's got a team on it that's highlighted somehow, it'll be part of that team set. I don't do my stuff that way, but these, because these actually have a player picture on them, I guess this is a bigger question. Like, if you have a checklist and it features a player on it, do you consider it one of the player's cards, or do you just consider it a checklist?
All right, I'm going to answer your question, and I'm going to ask you a question. Yes, I consider it one of those players' cards because I think it was 92, 93 Ultra had a Chris Chelios checklist, if I remember correctly, where he's like ghosted in the background and like the checklist boxes are superimposed over him, if I remember correctly. And I do have that as part of my Chelios collection. I think it was 92, 93 Ultra.
I think you're right. Didn't that have Yager on the back? Because I have it in my Yager book.
Oh, there you go. Now, my question for you, going back to the Ian Moran discussion, do you collect cards of Ian Moran with Team USA, even though that was before his time with the Penguins?
No.
Because he's not pictured with the Penguins.
Yeah, because I'm team first.
Gotcha.
I'm a true team collector.
Does your Penguins collection also extend to Muskegon Lumberjacks and Cleveland Lumberjacks?
It does.
Okay.
Actually, I have an extensive pile of both Cleveland and Muskegon and a ton of Wilkes-Barre.
Oh, yeah. Wilkes-Barre.
I even have some Wheeling Nailers cards.
Jeez.
Yeah. See, I'm hardcore.
I think I got a Wheeling card of Scott Darling somewhere in my collection.
There's not a lot. They didn't put out very many team sets over the years. And they have had players sprinkled throughout some minor league sets here and there. But it's few and far between.
Any last thoughts about this set before we wrap it up? Because I think I've pretty much said everything. I mean, come on, if I'm trotting out information about guys who played 3 games, but one went on to work in Hollywood and the other one went to work in video games, if I'm trotting out that kind of information, I've pretty much exhausted all my interesting notes about this set.
No, it's hard for me to even comment on that. Call it nonplussed, call it what you want. But that came out of left field, and I was like, wow, okay. I can't compete with that kind of information. That's crazy. But it's a great set, especially if you're going for older 90s sets. I think there's a lot of value to be had in there. Yeah, there's not a ton of rookie cards in there of impact type players, but there's 60 some Hall of Famers when you look back on this that are all included in that set. They're really nice looking. So, if you haven't built one of these yourself, it's certainly something to look at as adding to your collection. Just be careful buying boxes if you find old boxes. because they will be bricked. There is no doubt they will be bricked.
Yeah, Ultra was like the first set to go with that UV coating on both sides. I remember that being a selling point during the 92-93 season. Like, they were coated on both sides with UV coating. And yeah, part of the problem with that is that
Looks great, doesn't last.
Yeah, well, heat and pressure basically makes the UV coating bond to other surfaces with UV coating. So you think about cards being packed in too tightly. I did an article about bricking for the BCW Supplies blog. I'll link to that. Cards brick for a couple of reasons, but I mean, really, you think about cards that were like worthless in the 90s. These were pretty worthless in the 90s. Now I'm talking about if they were just opened. You opened a bunch of them. You ended up with 1,000 commons. You packed them together in a box as tight as you could because you were just storing them, right? Well, that pressure, coupled with maybe being put in a basement where it's a little damp, or an attic where it might get hot. And so basically what that does then is that you got your heat, you got your pressure, and then that's going to cause the chemical reaction, and then the cards are going to bond together. It's almost like that UV coating bonds to itself, and then when you pull the cards apart, that's why you get that paper loss.
Yeah, and it happens a lot. A lot. You run the risk anytime you go back that far on stuff like this. Heck, 10 years is like the shelf life on gloss. After that, you're rolling the dice. But yeah, I would definitely recommend this as a set, especially if you're a completist and you got to have everything from that time frame. So
yeah, definitely a fun set to own. I recommend it now. I mean, even though I say there are better sets to collect what you like. Even though I said this was my 9th out of 10th favorite sets from that year, I still have it in pages. And there are sets from that year that I don't have in pages just because I don't have the shelf space, like 93-94 Pinnacle. I don't have that set in pages. I do have it. I just never bothered putting it in pages because ain't got room for that. So got to be selective. All right, then I think we're good.
I think we're good.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to the Puck Junk Hockey Podcast. As always, if you've enjoyed the show, please be sure to like and subscribe. Please leave us a review wherever you listen to this podcast. Please give us a follow on social media. And until next time, collect what you like.
For more hockey goodness, follow us on Twitter @PuckJunk.